For those of you who are students, if you want to put your names in the chat, so if your professors are here tonight, they can see who's here and your name will be front and center in the chat. So if you want to put your name in the chat so they can see it, that would be great. Jake, you're my student. I see you. Okay, we see a lot of people shuffling in. That's great. Welcome, welcome, everybody. Okay. Well, why don't we get started? Because I see the number of participants hasn't ticked up in a second. So why don't we get started? Welcome, everybody. My name is Brooke Grant. I am a professor of practice in the Teacher Preparation and Certification Program here at Tulane. And I am here with Antoinette Williams. For those of you who don't know, Antoinette, at the age of 21, she was the youngest candidate to run for a seat on the Orleans Parish School Board. She was also the valedictorian of her graduating class at McDonough 35 High School here in New Orleans, and was a student at Xavier University, also here in New Orleans, while running her campaign. Today, she's pursuing her master's in educational leadership and policy at Boston College. So Antoinette, that in and of itself is very impressive, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to share maybe anything else you've been up to or anything that you think is important to your story that I didn't have in your bio.
Oh no, I think you covered everything. Other than that, recent things is I've become a board member for the Trinity Community Center in the Carrollton area. And I'm not 21 anymore, I'm 22 now. So that's something.
Nice. Okay, well, Antoinette, thank you for being here today. Many of us here at Tulane, as you may know, are not from New Orleans, but we're here in New Orleans now, and we're studying the school system in New Orleans. So in studying the school system in New Orleans, it's very important to us that we hear from those of you who experience the school system so that we can learn from your personal experience and learn from native New Orleanians.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you've been out of high school for a while now, but if you can kind of go back and maybe self-reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how your schooling was. What, if anything, do you think was a positive that really helped your growth? And what, if anything, maybe do you not look so fondly on when you look back?
Okay, great. So first, thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in. I see all of your names in the chat. Welcome. I graduated from high school from McDonough 35, like Brooke mentioned, 4 years ago. And there were things that I liked and didn't like, but I am a proud graduate of public schools here in New Orleans. Some of the things that I thought were really interesting and worked to my benefit with the way my teachers dealt with me in my schools was the fact that I've always been very opinionated, even if it was not what my teachers necessarily wanted to hear or what the administration wanted to hear. But even when it seems as though I was pushing back on rules, which I often did, there was always someone I had in my corner. So I can credit lots of my former teachers for always pushing me and supporting me, even if whatever I wanted to do at that particular moment went against what the norm or the school culture was. Some of the things I didn't care for in our system was we tend to like to look at things that are pretty. And what our system has a problem of doing is making things look really pretty on the outside. So, for example, when I was the first class, so my junior year is when we got into the new McDonough 35 building. And if you all haven't seen it, it's beautiful. But we also, my senior year, didn't have any books for our dual enrollment courses. For our first few classes, we didn't have transportation. So there was all of these issues happening inside of this building, but we have this beautiful building, right? So it's things like that that I was like, this is a problem. We can't focus on how things look on the outside. For example, when I was in high school, I got in trouble for wearing colored contacts when I was going to Sophie Right because I was on the marching unit. And the school leader at the time said that that wasn't the look that they wanted the school to portray, as if anyone on St. Charles could see my eyes as I marched up the street. But again, that same type of laser focus that they put towards disciplinary policies and uniform codes wasn't the same laser focus that they put towards actually teaching our kids. So
Interesting. Thank you. I love how you said that there were some educators who supported you even when you were kind of pushing back or being vocal about your education. A lot of the people on this call are studying to be teachers. So I was hoping you might talk about those educators a little bit more. What did they do to support you? When you look back on your favorite teachers, what qualities did they have, or what did they do to just support you?
So I think that goes back to this campaign that Barbie has called Closing the Dream Gap. And basically what that is research has proven that around the age of 6, little girls start to lose confidence and not dream as big. So that's around the age where you start to tell little girls, well, you can't really be an astronaut, or you can't really create whatever these big, amazing things are, not in the same way that they do with guys. So I think it was really great because I decided when I was in 6th grade that I was going to be president. And all of my teachers, well up into high school, when I told them this is what I'm going to do, they were like, okay, so if that's what you're going to do, this is the way we get it done. Even on the back of my graduation photos that I gave to my favorite teachers, it's like, don't forget to vote in 2036 because I'm running for president.
Oh, I love that.
Right. So they were really eager to support me in my research. They were really eager to support me in all of the extracurricular activities I participated in. They were just extremely supportive and encouraging. And regardless of how big the idea I had was, they helped me to see it to fruition. And I think in my earlier years, so like when I was at Sophie Wright in the schools before then, there was this focus on like this competitive streak. So my grades has to be better than the grades of the person next to me. Whereas when I got to McDonough 35, and I love my alma mater to that because that's where I became a person, and I'll credit them for that all day because they taught us different things that, build character. So when I transferred to 3-5, because I didn't get there until after my 11th grade year had started. Once I got there, I was under the impression that the main focus of everything is grades. And I need to make sure that I can get to the top and not necessarily worry about the person next to me. And I had amazing teachers like Mr. David Cash and amazing administrators like Mr. Lee Green, who set me down and was like, look, you're phenomenal, but you can't do it alone. Let us teach you how to delegate. Let us teach you how to work well with others. Let us teach you how to communicate well with others, because you can have this vision, but if you can't get others on board, it won't come to fruition. So a lot of those things that created the woman that's sitting in front of you today was instilled in me in those 2 years I was at McDonough 35, because those educators understood how to mold raw material, because that's what all of our students are. They all have a gift, they all have a passion. They just need to be molded in a way that helps them to succeed.
I love that. Thank you so much. And kudos to your teachers. And just, I love how you shared that story because it is a lesson for our students who are studying, to be teachers. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you answered this next question a little bit in your answer, but I'm interested in your decision to run for school board. So you mentioned ever since you were small, you said you were going to be president. So I was wondering, was it something that you always wanted to do, kind of like you spoke about? Or was there something specific that kind of sparked your desire? Or can you talk about your decision a little bit to run?
Yes. So when I was in 6th grade, I noticed that there were kids who were in my class and we were in the AP courses, and there were kids who weren't. But the kids who weren't in my courses were the kids that were in my neighborhood. So I would go to class all day. And when I went to Sophie Wright, the AP courses didn't mix with the other ones. So 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade, I was in class with the same kids every day. But when I would go home and I would be in like the parks, and New Orleans culture is very community oriented. So we would be in the parks eating seafood, and I'd be with my friends that weren't in any of my classes. So I knew from the beginning that there was a difference. There was also a difference in the things that we were being taught. And I didn't like that. So I knew that I wanted to influence policy around education. But being a sixth grader, I didn't know that there was other ways to do that other than being president. So that's what set my sights on that. And as I grew older, there was different things that showed me the different avenues I could take to make sure I could influence policy. So goals aren't so much so set on president as for Secretary of Education. But with the school board race specifically, I don't know if your students are aware, but New Orleans, once Cog Hill goes back to a charter, New Orleans will once again be the only city in the entire country that's entirely charter ran. So in 2018, my high school was the last school that was to be chartered, and it was in November of 2018. So in 2019, I began like doing more research into the school board. What are the roles and responsibilities? Who are making the decisions to charter these schools? Why are these decisions being made? And in doing that research, I stumbled upon an internship that the district was offering that was like deep into their website. I don't even know how I found it, but at that particular point in time, I was studying in London. So I applied immediately, and I got the call for an interview, but I'm out of the country. So I was like, can we please do it over the phone? And they did. So when I got back to the US, in May of 2019, I started working for the district, and I was really fortunate to be able to work in various departments to get a more holistic view. So I worked in external affairs, I worked in so much kind of started with communications, but with board operations and human resources. But one of the things that I was tasked with doing was working with the superintendent's advisory councils, one of them being the student advisory council. So my role was to go to the various advisory councils, take back their input and bring it back to the district so we could make changes where we saw fit based on these different groups' recommendations. So when I went and I sat down with the students, they're kids from all of the high schools around the city, and I'm like, okay, guys, this is what we're doing. What suggestions do you have? And the kids were like, we're not telling you anything until y'all fix what we told y'all last year. I was like, wait, I wasn't here last year. So what's going on? But I heard them loud and clear. They were tired of things being extremely performative. They were tired of people coming and jotting down notes or taking pictures with them, but not implementing any of the changes that they had been telling them that they needed or wanted. So when I started working with which is another student-led organization this past summer, the purpose of that group was to get young people in general registered to vote, informed on the candidates, and actually get them to the polls to vote. So what we did was we had several elected officials to come and talk to our kids, and the things they were telling them was just so disheartening. Like, this is a group full of young hopeful students, some getting ready to go into college, some getting ready to go in their junior or senior years, and you're telling them, we don't promote, or rather we don't try to reach out to young folks because we know y'all don't vote. So at this point, you're basically telling my kids that they're not important, and that was not okay. So from my conversations with both of those student-led groups, like, I think it'd be kind of hypocritical of me to tell you, you can do these things, you should do these things, you do have a voice. And when offered the opportunity to be that voice for them, if I didn't, so I had to. So that's what made me qualify.
I love that. Can you tell me a little bit about when you were doing the student groups? Can you remember anything else that they were voicing? Besides things being performative, were there any other like major themes that kept coming up when you spoke to the students?
Of course. So I remember one of the debates that the kids had was we were trying to figure out what, like, narrowing down their grievances to things that we thought were extremely important and things that we thought, like, this particular set of issues is something that we have to bring to the next level. And again, it was kids from various high schools, and one of the things that they brought up was uniforms. And one of the students who attended a school that doesn't have uniforms was like, well, that problem isn't important. We don't have that problem. And I had to make her aware of the fact that you don't have this problem because your school isn't doing this. but all of these other people do. So I think that was a really great teaching moment to show our kids that even if something isn't affecting you, that doesn't mean that it isn't a problem, and it doesn't mean that it's not something that you should get behind. So one of the major things that came out of those sessions with the kids, with both groups actually, was understanding the vast differences between the high schools in the city, even if they were a few blocks apart. And the kids understanding that, wow, things that I thought were a problem at my school isn't even something that kids at these other schools are even thinking about, or understanding I'm privileged to have this because kids at other schools don't. For example, I assumed that every high school in a city had a student government, a student council rather. We found out that's not true. I assumed that every high school registered their juniors and seniors to vote. We found out that wasn't true. So it was like some of these things that we take for granted and we don't think is an issue, we realized was once we got in this room with kids from all over.
Nice. And I love how you said that you felt that you had to run because, or else it would be hypocritical. Because so many people, like you mentioned, you're right. They'll ask them questions, take some notes, and then, you never see them again. So just you following up and actually running and them seeing you running, they were probably like, woohoo, okay, she does put her money where her mouth is. So
Definitely.
yeah. And I feel like that also shows the importance of like internships or real life learning because you working for them, sparked that in you like, okay, like maybe I can run, maybe I can do this. So I love that. And that's also a lesson. Don't be afraid to ask. Even though you were away abroad, you still weren't afraid to ask if you were able to do
Yes.
it. So
You
nice.
miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So just keep
Yeah.
shooting because one of them will go in.
Yes, I love that. So when you ran, what issues were most important to you?
Student voice was most important to me. First and foremost, everyone knows that everything I did and still am doing to this day is about making sure that there's a spotlight and a place for our kids to be vocal about the things that they're experiencing. Because what we're going through is different than what our parents went through. And what the kids that are currently in these buildings are going through is different than the things I went through, even though I was there 4 years ago. So there was that. I also placed heavy emphasis on safe school buildings. And I think people tend to like not fully understand what I mean by safe. A child doesn't feel safe if they feel as if though their teacher doesn't like them for whatever reason. Like something that I had to experience was walking through metal detectors to get into school, or having to wear clear book sacks. So my entire senior year, I did not bring a book sack to school because I was protesting the clear book sack policy. So I would literally like carry my notebook and pens and stuff with no bag. Um, but things along the lines of the school resource officers, or um, the different personnels in the school that just make our kids feel unsafe. And no one is able to learn or fully grasp any concepts that their teachers are putting in front of them if they feel uncomfortable or unsafe. So I thought that that was something that was extremely important to look at as well, in addition to accountability for our charter schools. I think the way New Orleans is set up now, everyone feels as though you have to be 100% charter or 100% anti-charter. And that's not the position I took. And I think that confused people as well, because my problem wasn't the charter schools that are doing what they're supposed to do. My problem are the ones that aren't. So I feel like if you're doing what you need to do, if your kids have the resources they need to succeed, kudos to you, keep it up. It's the ones who aren't that we need to increase accountability for and make sure that there's some type of turnaround, whether it be getting the district to directly operate these schools or finding charter management operations that can actually serve the needs of our students, as well as thinking about the charter system in theory gives them the autonomy that they need so that they can make their schools unique and tailored to the diverse student population that New Orleans has. But that's not what we've seen in reality. A lot of our schools are carbon copies of each other, offering the same curriculum. And that, again, that's not benefiting our kids.
Thank you. Was there anything that surprised you when you went from being a student to now a candidate and you kind of looked into the background of the school system? Was there anything that surprised you that you didn't necessarily see as a student, but then as you spoke more to community members or learned more in your internship that you were like, wow, I never even knew this was a thing when I was a student? Is there anything that's
Yes, there was so much. The first thing being the advisory group. So, though that particular one was new, I became aware of various programs that were being offered around the city, things that were put in place that wasn't being advertised to our kids, or wasn't being advertised to all of our kids, I should say. So, I thought it was a problem that depending on which school you went to, or which neighborhood you came from determine what opportunities you had access to. And that was a problem. Me not knowing like some of the avenues that we have in the city, me being unaware of those things when I was in high school. Because I'm like, I could have taken advantage of this, or I have classmates that I knew could have taken advantage of this. So trying to figure out ways to like streamline or make the things that the district is offering or different nonprofits are offering more accessible to all of our kids, for one. I think another thing that shocked me and continues to shock me was the budget. Because I was like, I think it's amusing in a really horrible way, some of the things we spend money on. Wow, there are some other things that we're neglecting. And I mentioned that earlier in terms of like the buildings and whatnot, whereas we still have kids using older textbooks. Like, for example, my little brother is 8 years younger than me, and he brought home an English textbook. And I was like, that looks familiar. And I grabbed his book. Keep in mind, he goes to MLK, but I grabbed his book and I opened it, and there was a Sophie B. Wright stamp in it. So I'm like, that's why this looked familiar. This is the exact same book I had when I was at Sophie B. Wright 8 years ago. Why, when he's at a different school 8 years later, he's using the same books?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So it seems like the things you're pointing out just point to the inequities, right? So some kids are hearing about certain opportunities while others aren't. Some kids are using new books. Other kids are, getting the leftovers from the kids that got the new books. So yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so let's talk about your campaign a little bit. So you're a college student on the campaign trail. Did anything surprise you, or what was campaigning like? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Both at the same time?
I think what explains best how I felt during it, we were at a forum, and it was a group of candidates. And one of the women running for judge, she was talking about how she was exhausted because she had stopped working full time and she was only working part time so she could be active in her campaign. And I was listening to how tired she was, and I was like, yikes. Yeah, I get it. I'm working. I'm running my campaign. I don't have the money to have an entire team. So a lot of the things that happened was me, on top of not only being in school, but being in my senior year. So I was taking 18 credit hours in addition to my senior capstone project. So working on my research, it was insane. There was several days where I wouldn't sleep or I wouldn't eat because there was just a million and one things that needed to get done. But I refused to complain throughout the entire process because I knew, one, how important the election was, especially to my kids, and two, how important graduating was, especially to me. So I was like, those are the two things that fueled me. But surprises, I think a positive surprise was the amount of people who came out and supported me. And when I heard some of the stories as to why people were helping me, it broke my heart to know that there were so many adults that said, I had your drive when I was your age. I had ideas when I was your age. No one helped me. Not only did no one help me, people stifled me. And I don't want that to help it happen to you. So that's why I'm going to help you. The Cagney, she was over my she was my field director, completely volunteer. Like she helped us with knowing where to go, which doors to knock on, and how to get things done. Completely volunteer, because she too is one of those people who said no one helped her when she was 21 trying to get into it. Um, the guy him who printed a lot of my signs and my push cards. Like, I was getting boxes of push cards. I was like, how much do I owe you? I'm trying to like scrap together some funds. He was like, you're good. Because again, when he was my age and tried to get started in doing different things, no one would help him. So it was just amazing that all of the people, no one on my team got paid. So that was a pleasant surprise. Now the negative surprises were the type of shots and attacks that were aimed at me that had absolutely nothing to do with the race or the kids or the school system. And I was taken back by the fact that, one, people would stoop so low, but two, they would have so much time to be involved in things that have absolutely nothing to do with our kids, and it would give that much energy to things that had absolutely nothing to do with our kids. And that just showed me why the education system in New Orleans is where it's at.
Mm-hmm. I never thought of that. Yeah. A lot of the candidates probably had a machine behind them with a press person and person who digs up the dirt and all that kind of stuff. And as a young person, like you said, you just
I had none of that.
didn't get paid. Interesting.
So
Yeah. But I love the story of all the people that supported you. I love that, to hear that.
Yeah, they were really, really great, and I can't thank them enough. I don't even think we have enough time for me to thank everyone who helped me, but it was really great to see how people would come out and support me. And honestly, one of the things we were also fighting against was the fact that the presidential race was happening, and there were so many judge races going on at the time. So I think the fact that we lost wasn't because my team didn't work, because we worked our behinds off to the last day. It was to the fact that there was so many other things going on that attention was taken away from the school board races. So unfortunately, it did come down to funds. So my opponent spent over 100K. Meanwhile, I spent under 10K. So you can see the difference in that. But we still only lost by 8% of the votes.
Yeah, nice. Well, congrats on how well you did.
Thank you.
Also, how you carried yourself during the campaign. I enjoyed watching it. So,
Thank you.
welcome. What advice would you give to other young people that might be thinking about running for office?
Do it. Jump in. It was funny to see how many people who, when I qualified, they were like, "You're not old enough to do that. You can't do that." I'm like, "Actually, you can run if you're 18. I'm 21. I'm really old enough." But people didn't know that.
Right.
I don't know why, but there was this assumption that you have to be well into your career to run, and that's not the case. So whatever position that you're interested in, whether it be school board or city council or whatever the case may be, do your research on it. Figure out what is it that this particular office does, so you can understand how will I do my role, how will I perform my role and do it well, and figure out what are the requirements to get there. And if you meet those requirements, which I'm willing to bet most of you do or will, go for it.
Nice. I love that. So right now you're studying ed leadership and policy. Do you have kind of an end goal in that, or a path in which you hope that takes you, or even are you interested in running again for a position?
So ultimately, I want to influence policy on education. So there are various ways to go about doing that. One being to run for political office. I haven't decided if I'm going to take that route. Um, so at this point, I'm looking at all the different options. I want to do whatever makes the most impact for our kids. Um, I'm also looking into possibly, after I conclude my master's degree in ed leadership and policy, getting my JD with a focus on ed law. So a lot of the cases that have sparked my interest are students who are expelled or suspended because of their hair. Or we saw recently about one of the kids, the little kids, who got in trouble because there was a BB gun in his Zoom frame. Things like that are cases and issues that I want to tackle. Like, I want to be that voice for our kids. I've always been an advocate for students and for teachers. So continuing that work in whatever way or path it takes me down.
Mhm. I love that. In my class just this past week, I was saying, if being an educator is not for you, ed law, like there's so many particular cases that have made such a big difference for students, like
Yes.
Southern Poverty Law Center and all their work. So education law, you can definitely make a difference for students that route too.
And I recommend it. We need more people fighting for our babies.
Yes. Um, so on that note, many of the students in this webinar are from a course of ours called Education in a Diverse Society. And it's kind of our intro course. And we talk about the education system in the US. And for a lot of students, it's kind of the first time they've been introduced to the inequities within the system. Or they recognize things that maybe they didn't recognize from before back in their high school or whatever. So a question I always get is, what can I do to help? What can I do to change this? What advice would you give to young people who are just starting to learn about inequities and want to do something, they just don't know what?
First and foremost, educating yourself. So reading different articles, reading different books, specifically from minority writers or people of color, or not even so much so just people of color, people from like lower socioeconomic status who can articulate the struggles and the problems that we're facing in our communities from firsthand experiences. So being made aware of the problems that are going on, because you can't fix anything or attempt to assist with anything if you're unaware of what the problem is. So starting there, and after that, getting involved. And there are a million and one ways to get involved. There are nonprofits all over the city. You can literally type in whatever you're passionate about. If it's trying to end child hunger, you can type that in on Twitter or Instagram, and like all of these different organizations will pop up. And just volunteering. Um, you mentioned earlier, like the importance of internships. Intern at some of these places, especially if you think you know exactly what it is that you want to do with your career and how you want to best serve kids. Intern prior to your junior or senior year so you can understand if this is something you want to do or not. Because if it is, great, continue on that path. But if it's not, figure that out soon so you can try to navigate to the correct path that you want to be on. Because I think it's really important for you not to feel as though when you're entering these spaces and attempting to help, it should not feel like a chore. Because if it feels like something you have to do, you're not going to want to do it. And then if you're not being your best self, you can't present your best self to our kids and in turn bring out their best selves. So it needs to be something that you're genuinely passionate about and educated on in order for you to impact whatever that particular problem is.
I love that. Yes. A lot of times when we first learn about something, we're like, want to go into fix mode, but no, just, educate yourself, see what
Pull
people
it back.
are already doing. Yeah. Support people who are already doing the work, you know, decide whether it's something you're passionate about. I love that advice. That's great advice. So before I get to questions, is there anything you'd like to share that I haven't asked about or?
No, I think we've covered just about everything. I think there's the part about getting involved, and I want to stress those internships again, because my internships have been so incredibly vital to my path. Um, I've interned with the Orleans Parish School Board. I've interned with Inspire NOLA. I've interned with Crescent City Renaissance Alliance. And in all of those things, I found a common theme. My overall goal is to make sure that the rights and privileges of children aren't being like trampled on, to make sure kids have access to the things they need to succeed and thrive. So figure out not only what is it that you want to do, but your why. If you can tell someone your why and you're passionate in it, your work is going to speak for itself, because you're not doing it for a paycheck. You're not even doing it for recognition. Like, you're doing it because this is something that you sincerely care about. You're doing it because your why is what fuels you.
Mhm. I love that. That's great advice. Thank you. So I see a couple questions in here. I think one of the ones before I get to the Q&A, I did see one in the chat that I want to point out before I get to the Q&A, just so it doesn't get lost in the chat. But I saw someone asked, how do you feel about the one app system?
There's something embedded in the one app system that is fueled by inequities. And no one has been able to pinpoint their finger to it, which is an additional problem. But we're aware of the fact that family A can write 10 schools down and not get into their top 10, whereas family B can put 5 schools down and get into one of their top 3. And this isn't something that's an anomaly and we've seen it once or twice. This is something that's ongoing. It's something that's extremely constant. Um, and we need to ask ourselves why. So the one app is part of that problem. We know this. There is no if, ands, or buts about it. That's where we are with things. There needs to be a more equitable way to decide which kids get to go where. But I think I think the whole fuss around the one app is because we don't have as many high quality schools as we should. So now the fight is, how do I get my child into this A or B school, where the fight should be, how do I make these C, D, and F schools A and B schools? Because if all of our schools were quality schools, then there wouldn't be so much of a fight as to who has access to these high quality schools and whose children are forced to go to these underperforming schools.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that there's like a lot of conversation around one app, as there should be, but I just hate when people get lost in having that conversation, not thinking about the fact that the reason we have a problem with this is because we have so many schools that are rated at C, D's, and F's. So can we work on fixing that?
Right. Yeah. Agreed. Do you have any political figures that inspire you?
Yikes. So first first off, Barack Obama, like, just he's that. Um I really follow his Secretary of Education, John King. Um, I love his organization, Ed Trust. So I keep up with different things that are going on with them. But other than that, there are some individuals who I see and I commend the work they're doing. With all of you aspiring to be teachers, I think someone who should be on your radar is Director Tay Anderson. He's on the Denver Public Schools school board. So I love the work that Tay is doing, that Director Tay is doing in his district. Is things from, if our teachers have to go in person, then our school board meetings should be in person. I've been saying that since the pandemic started. Things like, we need to provide sanitary products to our students. We need to provide like menstrual products to our students. Things along the lines of, we need breaks. So one of the things that is new, because we're in this new age of technology with virtual school, is typically when Denver would have snow days, it would be just that, a snow day. But now, because of the technology, they're like, okay, well, we're going to do virtual school this day. And he's like, wait, no, if it's a snow day, it's a snow day. Like, we're not going to try to like jam this, especially considering the fact that you don't know if someone is without power. You don't know what their circumstances may be outside of the classroom, outside of the school building. So let's not impose. So that's just to name a few, but that's a political figure. Oh, and Tay got elected when he was 19. Let's just add that in there. So yeah.
Nice. How do you stay motivated as a young female leader in the education sphere when other leaders may doubt your abilities?
Whew, love that one. That goes back to your why. Like there's been several instances where I've felt as if the folks around me have been trying to discourage me. But what keeps me motivated and what keeps me going is the fact that I know my validation does not come from those folks in those rooms. It comes from me succeeding and getting something done for my kids. There's several times where I'll walk in a room and I'm the youngest in the room and having to deal with condescending language like being called baby girl or things along those lines, or I walk in a room and I'm the only female in the room, being female and young. So now these men feel as though this is a space that they can dominate. Um, and I don't let it happen. I joke with my friends and family, but I say if I'm going to a meeting and I know it's going to be predominantly male or all male, but I know I'm intending to command the room, I put my pants on. and, and I know it's something that's like really minor, but it's important for them to know I didn't come here to look cute. I'm gonna look good while doing it, but I didn't come here to look cute. I came here to get whatever I need to get done. And what's going to happen is you're going to listen. So you have to be assertive, you have to be steadfast in your points, and you have to know what you're talking about because people are waiting for you to slip up just a little bit so they can say, see, this is why we don't need to do XYZ with these young folks, or see, this is why you don't need to do XYZ with women. You don't give them that opportunity. But we all make mistakes, but when you make those mistakes, you be the one to point it out and say, I was incorrect when I said this, but I've done my additional research and this is what's actually correct. And this is what we're going to do moving forward.
I love all that. That's great advice. Ladies, hear that? Put your pants on. I'm going to remember that. I love that. I don't know if you can talk about the next one, because I know in talking about schools and students, we have to have privacy. But what schools within New Orleans did you work to gain insight for your platform?
So as far as like working with like individual schools, I didn't. The closest I got to working with a specific school was I was a student teacher at Morris Jeff, helping out with their fourth graders. I love the babies. And I'm incredibly involved with my alumni association. So like the day I graduated from McDonald 35, the following day I was filling out my paperwork to join the alumni association, and I've been an active member since then, recently appointed to the board. So I've done a lot of work and intend to do a whole lot more with McDonald 35 moving forward. But aside from that, when it came to like my platform, it didn't come from working with the schools, because my internship with Inspire NOLA was at their main office, not necessarily in one of their schools. That insight came from being a student and remembering the things and the way I felt when I was a student, and the things that my teachers either did or didn't do, or the opportunities that were or weren't there for me and my classmates. That's what structured my platform.
Nice. Do you think there should be a limit on how many times the same person can run for school board? Does it always seem to be the same people in New Orleans, or?
I don't think there should be a limit. Um, but I do think we need to collectively work to get more people involved. Because typically what you want to happen, and this isn't necessarily the case, what you want to happen is if someone gets in and they're doing the work and they're doing it well, you want them to be able to continue to do that. Now, the fear and the reality of what's happening, which is why people consider limits, is if someone gets in and they're not doing the work and they continue to go and go. And what ends up happening with that is it's because people can get in, and if they're not being held accountable by their constituents, because the members of the board are held accountable by the people in their district, because it's their responsibilities to vote them in or vote them out. So if they're not being held accountable by the people in their district, of course they can do whatever it is that they want, because at this point, they're people that are loyal to them. that are going to vote for them continuously. There are people who are indifferent and may not vote at all in school board races. And then there's this group of folks who say, well, what you're doing isn't right, but what are they doing to mobilize, to organize, and to get that person out? So it was really great to see there were 21 people running for the 7 school board seats in this past election. But getting folks behind these people who intend to do good and intend to do right. So, I don't think there should be a limit. I think there should be more of a push on the community to get the right people in those seats.
Mhm. Because in some districts, not this past campaign, but in some districts, sometimes the incumbent goes unchallenged. So
Yes.
I love that. Not necessarily put limits, but let's push more people to run. I love that. This is an interesting question. If there was something you would go back and change about your campaign, what would it be?
So I didn't stand out on faith when it came to fundraising. And what I mean by that is supposedly it's very typical for candidates to spend money they have yet to receive. And I refuse to do that because I was like, okay, if I spend this money and it doesn't come in, then I'm responsible for paying it out of pocket. And I'm a college student. I don't have those
Yeah, that's
funds.
scary.
So, right. So there were some things that I think could have benefited my campaign from a financial standpoint that I didn't do or didn't purchase because the funds weren't there yet. And then the day of, well, let me say the day before, the day of, and the day after the actual voting day, donations came in.
Aww.
And I was like, even if this money would have gotten here just a week sooner,
Right.
2 weeks sooner, it would have made all the difference. So that's the only thing. But of course, hindsight is 2020. I think if I redid it without that information, I'd probably do it the exact same way and not spend money until I received it. But with me knowing that, there are some things that I would have purchased with knowing the money was coming later.
Right. That's interesting because I always wondered, like I hear of candidates having fundraisers or something like the day before. And I always think, what are they going to do with the money now? It's the election's tomorrow.
Pay back the
That
stuff
makes
that
sense.
they...
Yeah. Now I know. Thanks. Okay. We have a big upcoming special congressional election this weekend. Who do you think is the best education candidate and why?
So this one's really great. I'm with Troy. Just putting that out there. I think a few of the candidates, and keep in mind there's 15 people running, and we typically are only hearing about 2 or 3 of them. So looking into all of them, I think it's also like important to note who were supporting the folks that you thought would have been great for these school board seats as well. And now looking at them. So for example, Senator Carter was really supportive of my race, and was really about trying to get the right people in those places to do things for our kids. So that's what helps to inform my decision. But I think looking at where everyone stands and making sure that when you decide on a candidate, that their views are in line with yours and you understand where they stand. So.
Well, thank you. Do you think New Orleans students benefit from the charter school system? Or do you think we should go back to the traditional public school model?
I think students in New Orleans could benefit from the charter school system if it was used as it was intended. And again, that goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the charter schools having autonomy and being able to create these unique curriculums, like having schools that are based in STEM or having schools that are centered around the arts. But unfortunately, we're not seeing that. So as of right now, our kids are not benefiting from this system. It's quite the opposite. This system is taken away from our kids. So I think if the folks over the charter schools will say, even if it's a handful of the schools, because New Orleans has 78. If it's a handful of the schools who say, we're going to focus on cultivating talents of kids who are interested in art, let them go to these schools, because only one I can think of off the top of my head is Noka, and that's not accessible for everyone. Like my mom tried to get me in Noka when I was little, but there is no transportation. And parents who have to work don't have the time to bring their kids to and from school. So things like that take away from our kids. So if the charter school system operated in a way that had unique school options to meet the unique needs of the diverse students in New Orleans, it could be extremely beneficial.
Mhm. Thank you. We have someone in the chat who wants to pursue a career in teaching. So what types of internships should they look for? Do you know any within Orleans Parish?
Yeah, so TNTP has one. Don't ask me what the letters stand for, but it's a teaching fellowship. There are different ones. There are more now because of the pandemic, because you can do them virtually. So look up internships. You can just go online and look them up and you'll find them. For example, prior to the pandemic, I got an internship to teach students with special needs in Los Angeles. But of course, COVID struck and I wasn't able to do that. But they're out there. And you can also volunteer. I think people tend to overlook the fact that the amount of volunteer work you do is just as valuable as your internships. The places you intern at are just as important as your internships. So if you don't see a position available at an organization that you like their mission or their vision and you want to work with them, volunteer. And I guarantee you, if you're a phenomenal volunteer, they'll create a
Oh, yeah.
position for you. So
People are always looking for reliable, dependable, enthusiastic people.
yes.
And that question was from Clayton. Clayton, Antoinette gave you great advice, but also if you want to email me, I can let you know of some internships as well that I know of. So we have a question from Dr. Mayans who wants to ask his question live. Dr. Mayans, I think you just unmute. We'll see if you unmute if we can hear you. I don't know, Dr. Mayans. I apologize. Maybe you can just type it in the chat if you don't mind.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, now we
Yes.
can.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness, thank you. Forgive me, I'm new to this. And I'm giddy, Antoinette, because I've been following you and I was so excited that you were going to be here with us today. My name's Dr. Mayans and I teach in the TPC program. Can you all see me? You can't see me, can you?
No, we can't see
No.
you.
Okay. I teach in the TPC program with Brooke and several others, Denise. And so first, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here with us. That speaks volumes of how you feel about education. And of course, we're very passionate as well. And I just want to piggyback off one of the questions that was asked, if I might, which was about the charter system versus public school system. And I was so very happy to hear your response, which I thought was very fair. The assessment, I think, if I'm assessing what you said correctly, is that they were intended to do one thing, but it seems that most of them or many of them have gone off course from that original, and we see that as well. One of the things that I try to do when I'm out in the community with folks that are non-educators, so these aren't teachers, these aren't people like yourself that are very vested and interested in education, is so I'll often ask them, what do you think of the charter system? And the perception in the community is that it's really good, that it's come to, and I'm using this on purpose, so I wish you could see my quotes, coming to save New Orleans, you know what I mean? And so I'm perplexed by that because I came from North Carolina and we had a public school system, which was unified, had a similar calendar, had a lot of rights in place for students, families, guardians, parents, teachers do you see us ever shifting to a more unified public school system? And if so, what might be the biggest challenge of making that happen?
So I think first, when you're asking people how they feel about the charter system, it depends on who you're asking.
Mm,
Are they from here or are they not?
mhm,
Did their child get into their top picks or did they not? Is their
mhm,
child going to a rated school or are they not? Because
mhm,
if you ask any of the parents who children attend A rated schools, of course, I love the charter system.
mhm,
But if you ask the vast majority of parents whose child attend F-rated schools, they have a problem with it. Or the
mhm,
vast majority of parents whose children have to be bused across the city because they, for whatever reason, couldn't get into the school that's up the street from their home, they have a problem with that.
mhm,
So it all goes based on who you ask and what's their reasoning behind their answer.
mhm.
Um, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
And when the second part of your question about do I think that we'll ever get back to that, it is up to the board.
Yeah.
It depends on the board, honestly, and wholeheartedly. That's the only answer I can give you because we have to look at it and take into consideration that a few of the people who are on our board aren't from here. So
Mm,
there aren't necessarily those community ties to particular schools.
mhm,
um or the culture behind those schools or the history behind those schools, so there's no investment in whether or not this school should operate this way or the other.
mhm.
So I think that that's really important, and I thank you for being on and asking your questions, because I always love when people who aren't from here take the time to learn more about our system in the way that it was when it was benefiting those of us who've lived here our entire lives,
Mhm.
versus like me and Brooke talked about, seeing a problem and trying to fix it before you learn what
Yeah.
the actual problem is.
Yes,
So
you are so right about that, and just the way in which you just framed that, what are the reasons that folks say, yes, it's a beneficial system, is often what we forget to ask, and it's so vital. And another point you make with the historical reference, if you're not from here, you can't just apply a system from another place to here because this is such a unique place, right? It's why
exactly.
many of us, especially the professors, have come to live here. We love it because of its uniqueness. Well, I have a lot of hope because I'm listening to someone before me who's very intelligent and has a definite passionate for her community and for this work. And it gives me so much hope to hear your generation speak like this, because I think we've been waiting for the next generation to kind of pick up and get very active and excited. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll take my call off the air, Dr. Grant. She knows I'm real wordy, answering that. I look forward to meeting you in person one day. Do you, with this current system as it is, one of my concerns is the way in which we structure uh, grade levels. We have a lot of schools here that are K through 8, and I struggle with that. Um, I struggle with kindergartners being on school buses or in buildings with 7th graders because the needs are completely different. But I do realize a lot of this has to do with facilities and funding and things as such. Do you ever see us getting to a system where we truly have like the elementary schools and then the middle or junior high schools and then high schools?
Honestly, I don't see us
Okay.
getting there. I would hope so. I don't know if you were on the call from the beginning, but I told Brooke that something that I was really passionate about is making sure that our school buildings are safe.
Mhm,
And I think that that is a problem. I agree with you wholeheartedly that
mhm,
those different grade levels should not be mixing. Now, some things that I've seen in some of the schools, not saying that it's the fix or it's working, but what they'll do is they'll have a set of grade levels on different floors and have different staircases for different grades. And so Morris Jeff is my example for that. I thought it was really great how the upper level students had to use one staircase so they wouldn't topple over the younger kids in another.
mhm,
It's not a fix to the situation because again, those grades shouldn't be in the same building with one another. But they're kind of trying to work with it. So
Yes.
I commend Marisha for that.
I do too. I think that, if that's what the system is, it is, but how can you work within it? So I'll take my question off there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Antoinette, it is 6:30. So I just wanted to thank you so much for being here tonight. Before I worked in higher ed, I was a social studies teacher, a middle school social studies teacher. So seeing a young person as yourself, civically engaged, is like a social studies teacher's dream. So you were inspiring to me. I'm sure that you've inspired everyone on this call and everyone in the community who saw you. You've probably inspired so many people that you don't even know. So I just wanted to let you know that before we let you go. And I wanted to thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. And thank you again to everyone who tuned in and for all of your questions. If any of you have any follow-up questions, my email address is Antoinette45. So it's my name, FOR5@gmail.com. So
nice. And if I get any, I'll send them your way, Antoinette, too.
Got it.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.